And let's begin this hour with that massive winter storm sweeping the country just 2 days before Christmas.
Right now, more than 200 million Americans, that's 60% of the U.S. population, are under a winter weather alert. We are seeing snow, wind, and a bitter chill setting in from the Great Plains to the southeast. That's causing major travel headaches for people who are trying to get home for the holidays. So far today, at last check, more than 4,000 flights have been delayed or canceled, according to FlightAware. The weather is also causing problems on the roads, with hundreds of car crashes reported across the Midwest. We're going to bring you full team coverage this morning on the winter storm. NBC News meteorologist Angie Lassman is tracking the conditions across the country. First, though, let's go to NBC News correspondent Katie Beck, who's at Reagan National Airport outside of D.C. Katie, good morning to you. So, this time of year is always busy at airports, so a storm like this can really cripple people's holiday plans. What is it you're seeing? How are things moving there right now? And what are travelers saying about the delays and the cancellations?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. We're not seeing the volume of passengers this morning that we would expect on one of the busiest travel days of the year, and that's probably because people are checking their phones, finding out that their flights are either delayed or canceled. We know here in the Washington, D.C. area, between the three airports combined, there have been over 275 cancellations, and between yesterday and today nationwide, over 5,000 flights. So that is going to cause a huge headache for travelers as they try and make their flights today anywhere. Obviously, the Midwest is going to be the bulk of those cancellations, places like Chicago and Detroit. But it doesn't matter where you're going today. You are going to encounter some type of difficulty, given the fact that this weather has now taken hold. And in most areas, there are plunging temperatures and really strong wind gusts that have moved into the areas. And that is causing this ripple effect for all of the hubs and connections around the country. So more than 7 million passengers are expected to fly this holiday season. The unfortunate timing of this storm is that it falls on the two busiest travel days of the holiday season, yesterday and today. Passengers have been taking it in stride. Yesterday, a lot of passengers changing their flights to be earlier to try and get out of the way of the storm. It's obviously too late to do that now, but here's what some passengers had to tell us.
No, it doesn't bother me. No stress. I know it's out there. Make the best of it.
My dad texted me and he was like, I don't think you'll make it if you come on Friday. And we're like, yeah, maybe we should change our flight. So yeah, we did. Well, otherwise we wouldn't be able to be in Chicago with our family for the holidays.
And just to finish that story, that was actually yesterday. She did change her flight and she did get to Chicago ahead of the storm. As I said, today, the likelihood of being able to pull that off has greatly diminished. The weather has definitely impacted across the country. Flights from Florida to Chicago to Detroit, New York, and here in Washington, D.C., we are seeing more cancellations and delays pop up on that board every minute. So a bit of a travel headache today for folks for sure.
And Katie, how are airlines helping passengers whose flights have been impacted by the storm?
I think they're doing all they can to make changing flights and rescheduling easier. But the problem is that there are already people who have booked flights for Christmas Eve and Christmas, and those flights are probably full. So to now try and reschedule all the folks from Thursday and Friday onto those flights is going to prove difficult. There are not the flight crews available. There aren't the planes to do it. Even if the weather clears, it's going to be really, really chaotic to try and get all of those rescheduled passengers onto booked flights that have been booked for months out, because it is the holiday is upon us now.
And for Katie, for the people who are trying to plan to fly out this morning, what should they know before heading to the airport, and what should they be doing if their flight is delayed or if it's canceled?
Yeah, obviously check your status before you leave for the airport. There's no reason to sit here for 7 hours if you don't have to. But be sure to check your status regularly, and then be prepared. Pack snacks, pack extra clothes, be prepared to wait. Maybe have Uber Eats phone number on hand. We do know they deliver to airports. The people waiting today may need to take advantage of that if you're here for 7 hours. So just sort of have your backup plans in place, because it could be a long wait.
All right, extra snacks, always a good idea. Katie Beck, thanks so much. Let's get more now on what you can expect from the storm this holiday weekend.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman is here and will be here for a long time, I feel like, tracking the system's path. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, a busy couple of days ahead of us. We've already seen this storm impacting much of the country. Now it's starting to impact folks in the Great Lakes and in the Northeast. But let's take a look at some video that's come out of those locations that have already seen the snowy conditions, the bitter cold. That's in Indiana. You can see we're seeing snow falling sideways. And why is that? Well, it's because our winds have been 40, 50, even 60 miles per hour in some locations. And that's just the snow that we're talking about. We also have that threat of rain. We have the threat of bitter cold. So let me tell you exactly what's going on with where this system is going and what's going on. If you take a look at those crashing temperatures, this is going to be one of the things that we really want to monitor, especially if you're watching from the Northeast, D.C. to New York and up into Boston. Those places are dealing with rain right now, but in a hurry. We're going to see the rain move out, the surfaces remain wet, and then we have temperature drops anywhere from 30 to 40 degrees in a matter of 12 hours. By 7 o'clock, it'll be 15 degrees in New York. If you step outside right now, it is not 15 degrees out there. It feels quite nice for this time of year. That's not going to last. We'll see the icing on the roadway, so if you plan to be out and about, hitting the road, traveling at all, just be aware of that. As far as temperatures elsewhere, sub-zero across the country, really from Bismarck down to Oklahoma City and into Dallas. They are seeing wind chill values below zero, -6 for what it feels like in Dallas. Remember, you're going to want to dress for that temperature if you're going to be out and about, because that is what it's going to feel like to you as you spend time outdoors. Looking ahead at those wind chill temperatures through the next couple of days, Atlanta -3, 7 degrees for what it'll feel like by Sunday if you're celebrating Christmas. And even as far south as Orlando, temperatures will feel like the 20s. So you are not escaping this system if you are in the Sunshine State, unfortunately. As far as the snowfall is concerned, it's kind of confined to the Great Lakes, really. In places like Buffalo and western parts of Michigan, they really can handle a whole lot of snow. But the problem with this forecast of 24 to 36 inches is that it also is accompanied by really strong winds, anywhere from 40 to 50, even 72-mile-per-hour winds expected for Buffalo. And it's prolonged. It's not just a couple hours here and there. This could be a situation where Buffalo could see 30 hours of whiteout conditions, and then they're starting to clean up on Christmas, which could be a mess, of course, for anyone that has Christmas plans, and not to mention Christmas Eve plans. The airport impacts, you heard Katie talk about it. It's going to be immense. Here's the most likely locations today. It's going to be the snow for Chicago, Detroit, and as we get into Cleveland, it'll be the rain, the slick conditions for folks along the East Coast. And by the way, if you're in the West or anywhere else, maybe the midsection of the country, with temperatures at those levels, it's going to be really difficult for de-icing. So it's not even just if you have the precipitation around, the snow or the rain. It's also the temperatures are problematic for these planes taking off. And of course, the roads, they look like a mess too, especially, again, the Great Lakes to the Northeast. That's the pinpoint of the biggest impacts today.
You come to us from Florida. How are they going to handle 20-some degree temperatures there?
I can tell you from experience, the scarves, the boots, the Ugg boots, the hats, they're all out at 45 degrees.
Yeah,
so I don't know. We're going to have to check on our friends. They have falling iguanas at those temperatures,
yep.
So we'll see.
All right, we'll see. Angie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Now to the crisis at the southern border and the lead up to what could be the end of the Title 42 border policy. Border cities like El Paso, Texas, have declared a state of emergency, with city officials saying the steady influx of people is too much to handle. They have nowhere to house the overflow of migrants, and many of them, including women and children, are forced to sleep on the streets in dangerous cold temperatures, just as an Arctic blast is sweeping the country. That includes Texas. NBC News correspondent Guad Venegas joins us now from El Paso. Guad, I mean, this is like a perfect storm. Temperatures are plummeting because of this Arctic blast. The city has this surge in migrants beyond its housing capacity. How low are temps expected to get there where you are today? And what are you seeing and hearing from people there on the ground?
Joe, well, it's 20 degrees right now. It says that the weather report says it feels like 7 degrees with the wind chill, and it's really the wind that hurts. It's expected to drop about 2 degrees, so it'll drop down into, I think I saw that it was 19, 18 degrees in the next 2 hours before sunrise. And there's people sleeping on the street right behind me. This is an area with shelters that are full, and you can see they've covered themselves up as best as they can. And these rolls extend a few blocks in this direction, across the street. This is one of the areas in downtown El Paso. There's another area by the bus station where people are also sleeping on the street. So the city of El Paso has done what they can to provide shelters for a lot of the asylum seekers. They did open a new shelter at the convention center where they were offering hundreds of beds. They have other locations. And last night, we did see some vans come by, city vans, taking some of the asylum seekers into those shelters. Now, here's the issue, Joe. A lot of the migrants that are here are not asylum seekers. These are migrants that entered the country undocumented, that have not turned themselves into Border Patrol, and that's why they are not going to those shelters. The shelter you see behind me, that's a Catholic shelter that took in as many as they could. Some other men were driven over to another church, and they have offered buses. There are city buses. You can see one here. We saw another one in another part of downtown where people who just can't be in the cold anymore are taken in. When we arrived, we were told there was a young woman around here that a pastor spoke to, and she just couldn't be out in the cold anymore. The pastor telling my producer that her feet had cuts, and she looked like she just was in and out of consciousness, so they took her in the bus. She was feeling much better a few minutes ago, and that's the situation here, Joe.
Guad, I mean, the numbers tell part of the story. Customs and Border Patrol says that migrant encounters at the border hit 230,000 in October. That was the third highest month in recent history. But I'm really more interested right now in just the human story and the impact on the ground there. I mean, do officials there have a plan in place to help people, especially as we're heading deeper into these winter months?
Well, officials prepared over the last week with the shelters, with food, with clothing, but it's also been a lot of charities, churches coming in to help the people that are crossing into the United States that need this help with the low temperatures. So they are spending money to offer some of this help, but what we've seen as of now, most of that help is being offered to the asylum seekers that have some type of paperwork after they are processed by CBP, and it sort of leaves a lot of the undocumented migrants that have come into the United States like these in limbo. A lot of them did not know it was going to get this cold. In fact, for the last few days, everyone we spoke to, we made sure they knew the temperature was going to be dropping to what we're feeling right now, especially because a lot of the migrants, Joe, the ones on the American side and on the Mexican side, do communicate on a daily basis using their cell phones through WhatsApp.
All right, Guad, appreciate everything you're doing and appreciate your reporting. Thank you so much.
Now to the January 6th investigation. The bipartisan committee capped off its historic 18-month investigation into the deadly attack on the Capitol with the release of its final report yesterday. The more than 800-page report comes just days after the committee held its final meeting, voting to recommend the Justice Department pursue criminal charges against former President Trump. Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who created the committee, speaking yesterday just before the report was released.
The 117th Congress began with a violent assault on our democracy. And now we hear its conclusions. We have a vital roadmap ensuring justice will be done and that this won't happen again.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us now. Julie, good morning. We, of course, had a pretty good idea of what would be included in this final report, but now that it's been released in its entirety, what are the major takeaways from the committee's investigation?
Yeah, Valerie, when I was looking at this report last night when the committee dropped it very, very late into the night, this 800-plus page report goes chapter by chapter into essentially what they did in the last 18 months. They held these hearings, public hearings over the summer and into the fall. That's essentially the guidelines that this report follows. But I think the committee does a very effective job while not necessarily presenting any new revelations in this report from what they've already discussed, but going into great detail of just how they came to their conclusions that former President Trump deserved to be criminally prosecuted for his role on January 6th. They go chapter by chapter, starting with the big lie, going through Trump's attempts to subvert state and local officials, to his fake elector plot, as well, putting blame actually on someone named Kenneth Chesebro, not John Eastman, actually, for being the architect of this fake electors plot, going moment by moment and piece by piece from their 1,000 plus witness interviews to the more than 1 million pages of documents the committee received, and also at the end outlining recommendations for how to prevent something like this from ever happening in the future. And I should note that in the coming days, the committee will continue to release, of course, transcripts from their interviews. They couldn't fit possibly all of that into the hearings that they've held so far. So this is really just a cataloging of all the information the committee was able to gather. And now, of course, it's up to the Department of Justice to continue this investigation once the committee disbands in the coming days and Republicans take control of the lower chamber.
And in the report, the committee urges lawmakers to examine whether to create a, quote, formal mechanism to decide whether Trump and others identified in the report should be barred from holding future office. What could this mean for his bid for presidency in 2024?
Yeah, in the report, just to read from that section, that they actually want congressional committees of jurisdiction, they say, to evaluate whether there is a mechanism under the 14th Amendment to bar anyone mentioned in this report, including, of course, the former president, who already announced his bid for 2024 to seek the office of presidency again, whether they can be barred from ever doing that under the 14th Amendment for inciting an insurrection. That's just unlikely because, right, the days are ticking, the Senate's gone, the House is about to leave later today. Republicans are going to take control of the House. And remember, when the former president was impeached twice, including for this, and then that went to trial in the Senate, not enough Republicans there voted, although 7 did, to hold him accountable in that way. So that's just not likely. Another recommendations the committee put forward is reforming the Electoral Count Act, which the Senate already passed yesterday. The House is on a glide path to passing today. So that's something that actually is going to be a reality. And that was a bipartisan effort in the Senate and the House.
And Julie, the House is expected to pass that $1.7 trillion government spending bill today, just ahead of tonight's deadline. We know there was a lot of back and forth between both parties about what spending should be included in this bill. So what finally made the cut?
Well, the one thing that I just mentioned, because we're talking about January 6th, is reforming the Electoral Count Act. That slid in through the omnibus bill that the Senate passed yesterday. It's just an easier mechanism to give cover to some Republicans who wouldn't necessarily vote for that measure alone. Separately, other things in this bill, of course, $45 billion in aid to Ukraine. That comes just a day after President Zelensky addressed Congress, the Senate finally passing that. And I just want to note, in addition to the things you see on your screen, a few amendments the Senate was able to pass yesterday, which is why it's holding up passage in the House right now. And they really expand services for new mothers, for pregnant moms, especially in the workplace, expanding breastfeeding capabilities as well, and going against discrimination for pregnant workers. So those are just some of the things that the Senate was able to slide into this bill yesterday. Of course, other things didn't make it into the bill, such as the Afghan Adjustment Act, giving money for those refugees who were here since the U.S. withdrawal of Afghanistan in 2021. So some things didn't make the cut. Other things did. Overall, a $1.7 trillion package to fund the government through September 30th.
Okay, Julie, thanks so much.
Former FTX CEO and crypto king Sam Bankman-Fried made his first U.S. court appearance yesterday after he was extradited from the Bahamas to face fraud charges. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen has the details.
Disgraced crypto entrepreneur Sam Bankman-Fried released from federal custody wearing an ankle monitor to await trial on fraud charges that prosecutors called a crime of epic proportions, alleging $8 billion of customer funds missing. He's indicted on 8 counts that can send him to prison for life. Bankman-Fried posted a $250 million bond, co-signed by his parents and secured by their home in Northern California, where SBF will be under house arrest. Prosecutors called it the largest ever pretrial bond they were aware of.
His alleged victims looking at this are not going to be happy that he's freed.
The thing is, he's not free. He's on house arrest, which is essentially jail, just jail at home.
In court, the former FTX CEO only heard saying, "Yes, I do," when the judge asked if he understood the consequences of not following the rules, a warrant for his arrest. Prosecutors said Bankman-Fried's decision not to fight extradition and to return to the U.S. from the Bahamas, where he lives, factored into their decision to offer him bail. Investigators turning up the pressure, announcing 2 top business partners agreed to plead guilty to multiple fraud charges and cooperate with the investigation. And the U.S. attorney had this message to other employees of Bankman-Fried's companies.
If you participated in misconduct at FTX or Alameda, now is the time to get ahead of it. We are moving quickly, and our patience is not eternal.
Bankman-Fried has not yet entered a plea
Once he leaves New York, the judge restricted any further travel to Northern California and set his next court date for January 3rd. Ron Allen, NBC News, New York.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.